Good afternoon. My name is Frank Pezzella, and I'm an associate professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Today, I'd like to talk to you about some of my research regarding intersectional hate crime victims, particularly Black and transgender hate crime victims. In this research, we argue, that Black and transgender hate crime victims are subject to more severity than other transgender victims, as well as cisgender victims. Now, it's a known fact that hate crimes hurt more than ordinary crimes, that the injury and severity associated with hate crimes are severe. But we argue that transgender victims are even more likely to get hurt, and Black and transgender victims, even within that category, is more likely to be hurt. So basically, we formed this hypothesis that says Black transgender hate crime victims are at higher risk for victimization compared to other transgender and cisgender victims. To inform this hypothesis, we established two research questions. How do Black transgender individuals experience physical, psychological, and sexual harms during hate crime victimization? And also, how do these harms compare to those experienced by other transgender and cisgender victims? To test this hypothesis in the current study, we use data from the National Crime Victimization Survey, a representative sample of victims throughout the United States that's collected every year. We analyzed the years of 2017 to 2023 when NCVS included measures of gender identity. We formed four dependent variables: whether the victim suffered a major, minor, or any physical injury, or was he injured during a sex crime. Analytic techniques: we devised four logistic regression models to assess the morbidity of Black, transgender, and gender non-conforming hate crime victims and other transgender and cisgender victims. As our partial model will indicate, there's definitely a gender effect. You see in the red that females are more likely to incur psychological, physical injury, any physical injuries, and sexual physical injuries. But transgender, gender non-conforming victims were almost 11 times more likely to suffer a physical injury as a result of a sex crime. We see a race effect as well. Blacks are 26% more likely to suffer a physical injury, but consistent with our hypothesis, we see in this partial model, that Black and transgender intersection is 5 times more likely to suffer a physical injury and almost 3 times more likely to suffer physical injury as a result of a sex crime, and almost 74% more likely to suffer a physical injury. It's important to note that we control for other circumstances that may contribute to these types of injuries. So in our full model, you see that we control for weapons used in the offense, stranger relationships, and non-citizen status. We see under psychological injuries that, consistent with the partial model, transgender and gender non-conforming individuals are almost 5 times more likely to suffer psychological injury and almost 7 times more likely to suffer a physical injury as a result of sexual abuse. We see the race factor still remaining prominent. 20% more likely if you're Black, 12% more likely to suffer any physical injury. But consistent with our hypothesis, we find that the intersection being Black and transgender, you're almost 7 times more likely to suffer physical injury, and prominently, almost 4 times more likely to suffer a physical injury as a result of a sex crime. So what does all this mean? First, both the partial and full models depicted an intersectional impact of race and transgender identity on different types of injuries. Being Black and transgender increase the odds of physical injuries for sex crimes and other physical, primarily minor injuries. In general, people identified as transgender, and specifically Black and transgender, sustain lifestyles characterized by high levels of morbidity and mortality because of hate violence. We think that studies that only include one aspect of a person's identity really undermine the additional risk that's associated with the extra identity. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Look forward to talking with everybody at the conference. Thank you.